My name is Samuel Washington, but most folks around Atlanta just call me Big Sam. Been 68 years on this earth, and I reckon I've learned a thing or two about building things that last. Concrete and steel mostly, but also something harder to construct and easier to tear down. A family legacy built on blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Sitting here in my home office, looking out at the garden Dolores planted before the Lord called her home 3 years ago, I'm fixing to tell you a story that'll make your blood boil and maybe, just maybe, restore your faith in what's right and what's wrong. It's about how my own children, flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, turn their backs on the man who gave them everything, and how sometimes you got to tear down what's rotten to build something clean again. See, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Hell, I wasn't born with any spoon at all. Grew up in the 4th Ward, back when it was nothing but shotgun houses and big dreams. My daddy worked the railroads, and my mama took in washing. They taught me one thing that stuck harder than Georgia clay on work boots. Son, ain't nothing in this world free, and anything worth having is worth working for. Started swinging a hammer when I was 14, working summers with my Uncle Jerome's construction crew. By the time I graduated high school in 1974, I could frame a house, run electrical, and lay foundation that would outlast Judgment Day. But I had bigger dreams than just working for somebody else's vision. Met Dolores at Ebenezer Baptist in '76. She was singing in the choir, voice like honey over warm cornbread, and I was just another young buck trying to look important in a borrowed tie. Took me 6 months to work up the courage to ask her daddy for permission to court her. Old Mr. Johnson looked me up and down like I was measuring up for a coffin. "Boy," he said, "what you got to offer my daughter besides good intentions and rough hands?" I told him the truth. "Sir, I got a strong back, a clear head, and a plan to build something that'll last. Your daughter won't want for nothing if she'll have me." We married in '78, and I kept my word. Started Washington Construction with a pickup truck, a toolbox, and $500 borrowed against Dolores's engagement ring. First job was a simple addition for Mrs. Henderson down on Auburn Avenue. Took me 3 weeks working nights and weekends, but when I handed her those keys, she looked at my work and smiled like I'd built her a palace. "Samuel," she said, "you got the gift. This work's got your soul in it." She was right. Every nail I drove, every beam I raised, every foundation I poured, it all had purpose. Wasn't just building houses, I was building our future, brick by brick, board by board. The company grew slow but steady through the '80s. Found my niche in custom homes for Atlanta's growing black middle class. Folks who'd made something of themselves and wanted a place to show for it. Teachers, preachers, small business owners, folks who understood the value of honest work and quality craftsmanship. Dolores kept the books and managed the office while raising our 3 children. Michael, born in '79, Monica in '81, and Marcus Jr., we call him MJ, in '84. She had a head for numbers that put my high school math to shame and a way of talking to clients that made them feel like family. "Sam," she'd tell me while balancing the ledgers late at night, "we ain't just building houses. We're building generational wealth. Our babies won't have to start from nothing like we did." And Lord knows we made sure of that. By the time the '90s rolled around, Washington Construction was pulling in serious money. We'd built over 200 homes across metro Atlanta, from modest starter homes in Decatur to grand colonials in Buckhead. I'd diversified into commercial work too, churches, community centers, small office buildings. We moved the family to a 5-bedroom colonial in Stone Mountain, complete with a 3-car garage and that garden Dolores always dreamed of. The kids went to the best private schools, took piano lessons, played sports, had everything we never had growing up. Christmas mornings looked like toy store explosions, and every report card with good grades meant a special dinner at whoever's favorite restaurant. But here's the thing about building a foundation. You got to make sure it's level and strong, or everything you put on top of it starts to shift and crack. Looking back now, I can see where Dolores and I made our mistakes. We gave those children everything, but maybe we didn't make them earn enough of it. Michael, my eldest, showed promise early. Smart as a whip, good with his hands, seemed like a natural to take over the business someday. Got him a business degree from Morehouse, set him up with his own crew by 25. But somewhere along the way, success went to his head. Started thinking he was smarter than his old man. Started cutting corners on jobs, treating workers like they were beneath him. Monica, my princess, was always the apple of my eye. Bright, beautiful, ambitious, got her MBA from Emory and talked about starting her own marketing firm. But instead of building something, she seemed more interested in spending what others had built. Always had her hand out for this project or that investment, none of which ever seemed to pan out. And MJ, my baby boy, well, let's just say he inherited his mama's charm, but none of her work ethic. 28 years old and still finding himself, which apparently requires a monthly allowance that would choke a horse and a condo in Midtown that I pay for. Dolores saw it too, toward the end. The cancer took her slow, gave us time to talk about things that mattered. One evening, sitting on our back porch watching the sunset paint the sky purple and gold, she took my hand in hers, so thin by then, like bird bones, and said something I'll never forget. "Sam, baby, I'm scared we raised them wrong. They don't understand the value of what you built. They see it as their right instead of your gift." I wanted to argue with her, tell her she was wrong, that our babies would come around, but deep down, I knew she was speaking truth. They'd all lived off the Washington construction gravy train for so long, they'd forgotten what it felt like to be hungry. After Dolores passed, things got worse. The kids showed up for the funeral, of course, all tears and poor daddy this and poor daddy that. But within a month, they were back to their old ways. Michael wanted money to expand his operation. Monica needed an investment in some social media startup. MJ just wanted his monthly check to keep coming. I kept giving because, well, what else was I supposed to do? They were my children, my legacy, the reason I'd worked 60-hour weeks for 40 years. Every time one of them looked at me with those eyes, Michael's determined stare, Monica's sweet smile, MJ's boyish charm, I saw Dolores in their faces and my resolve crumbled like wet concrete. But foundations can only support so much weight before they start to crack, and mine was about to get tested in ways I never imagined. The beginning of the end started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in March. Monica, voice bright with excitement, calling to tell me she was engaged. "Daddy, I'm getting married. His name is Marcus Richmond III, and he's wonderful. We met at that charity gala I told you about, and he proposed last weekend at the Four Seasons. I'm so happy. Now, I'd raised a daughter, so I knew this day would come. Part of me was happy for her, truly. But something in the way she said his name, Marcus Richmond III, put a knot in my stomach that I couldn't quite explain. "That's wonderful, baby girl," I told her. "When do I get to meet this young man?" "Soon, Daddy, real soon. And Daddy, we're going to need to talk about the wedding. I want it to be perfect, just like Mama would have wanted. That should have been my first warning." When Monica said she wanted something to be perfect, it usually meant expensive, real expensive. But I was thinking about Dolores, about how she'd always dreamed of walking our daughter down the aisle in a beautiful ceremony, and how she'd never get that chance. "We'll make it perfect, baby girl," I promised, "whatever it takes." Lord help me, I had no idea what I was promising, but I was about to find out. Meeting Marcus Richmond III was like getting hit with a cold slap of reality on a warm Georgia morning. Monica brought him to Sunday dinner 2 weeks after that phone call, and I knew within 5 minutes that this boy was trouble with a trust fund. He walked into my house like he owned it, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most folks' monthly salary, and gave me one of those limp handshakes that told me everything I needed to know about his character. His eyes swept over our home, the home I'd built with my own hands, where I'd raised my family and loved my wife, like he was appraising it for auction. "Mr. Washington," he said in that polished prep school accent that sounded like marbles rolling around in his mouth. "Monica's told me so much about you. The construction business. How quaint. Quaint. Like 40 years of honest work was some kind of hobby." "Been good to us," I replied, watching how he held himself apart from everything, like he might catch something from being too close to real work. "Put 3 kids through college, built a good life. What line of work you in, son?" "Private equity," he said, straightening his tie. "Richmond and Associates. Perhaps you've heard of us. We specialize in acquisitions and portfolio optimization." I hadn't, but I nodded anyway. Monica was beaming at him like he'd just announced he'd cured cancer, and I didn't want to spoil her happiness. Not yet, anyway. Dinner was a painful affair. Marcus spent most of it on his phone, taking what he called urgent calls between courses of my famous barbecue ribs. The same ribs Dolores used to make every Sunday, the recipe I'd learned to keep her memory alive. When he wasn't on the phone, he was regaling us with stories about his family's property in Martha's Vineyard and their little place in Aspen. The Richmond family's been in Atlanta since before the Civil War, he announced while picking at his plate like the food might bite him back. My great-great-grandfather founded Richmond Holdings. We've been stewards of old Atlanta money for 5 generations. Old Atlanta money. I bit my tongue, but inside I was thinking about what old Atlanta money really meant and where it came from. 5 generations ago, folks who looked like me weren't accumulating wealth in Atlanta. We were being counted as somebody else's wealth. But what really got under my skin was how he treated Monica. Not mean exactly, but like she was a pretty accessory he'd picked up at a high-end boutique. When she'd try to contribute to the conversation, he'd pat her hand and smile in that condescending way rich folks do when poor people try to speak at the grown-ups' table. After they left that evening, I sat in my recliner with a glass of bourbon, thinking about what Dolores would have said. She had a gift for reading people's souls, could spot a fake from across a crowded room. I knew exactly what she'd have thought of Marcus Richmond III. But Monica was in love. Or at least in love with the idea of being in love with someone from his world. Over the next few months, I watched my daughter change. The girl who used to call me 3 times a week started calling once if I was lucky. When she did visit, she brought Marcus along, and somehow every conversation turned into a lecture about how modern families operated. "Daddy, you're so old-fashioned," she'd say with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Marcus's family handles things differently. More sophisticated." Sophisticated. Another word that made my teeth ache. The first real crack in our family foundation showed itself about 2 months before Monica announced her engagement. I was having my usual monthly dinner with all 3 kids, something Dolores had insisted we continue after she passed, when Michael dropped his own bombshell. "Dad, I need to talk to you about the business," he said, cutting his steak with aggressive precision. "I've been thinking, and I believe it's time for Washington Construction to evolve. Modernize our approach." "What kind of evolution you talking about, son?" "Well, for starters, we're leaving money on the table with all this custom work. Cookie-cutter developments, that's where the real profit is. Buy cheap land, throw up houses fast as we can, flip 'em before the ink's dry on the permits." I set down my fork and looked at my eldest boy, the child I'd dreamed would carry on what I'd built. "Michael, we ain't in the business of throwing up houses. We're in the business of building homes. Quality homes that'll stand for generations. Dad, with all due respect, that's old thinking. The market's changed. People want affordable housing fast, not these overpriced custom jobs that take 6 months to finish." Overpriced? The word came out sharper than I intended. "Son, every house we build is priced exactly what it's worth. Good materials, skilled craftsmen, attention to detail. That costs money." "See, that's the problem." Monica chimed in, and I could hear Marcus's influence in her tone. "You're thinking like a tradesman instead of thinking like a businessman. Marcus says—" "I don't give a damn what Marcus says," I snapped, and the table went quiet. "This is still my business, and it'll be run according to my standards as long as my name's on the building." MJ, who'd been unusually quiet during this exchange, chose that moment to drop his own little grenade. "Dad, speaking of your name on buildings, I've been thinking maybe it's time I got more involved in the family business too." Now that surprised me. MJ had never shown any interest in construction work, could barely change a light bulb without calling for help. "What kind of involvement you talking about, son?" "Well, I was thinking I could handle the marketing side, social media, website design, maybe bring the company into the 21st century. I've got some great ideas about branding and digital presence." I waited for him to mention salary expectations, and I didn't have to wait long. "I figure I could start at maybe $75,000, with room for growth based on performance. $75,000 to post pictures on Facebook and design websites. For a boy who'd never worked a day in his life, never felt the satisfaction of building something with his own hands, never understood that reputation and quality were the only marketing that mattered in construction. That's when it hit me like a load of bricks falling off a scaffold. My children weren't talking about joining the family business. They were talking about dismantling it. taking everything I'd built with Dolores and turning it into just another money-making scheme. But the worst was yet to come. As we were clearing the dishes, Monica pulled me aside in the kitchen, her voice dropping to that sweet, manipulative tone she'd perfected as a teenager. "Daddy, there's something else we need to discuss. Marcus and I have been talking about the wedding, and we want it to be really special. Like, really memorable. Course you do, baby girl. It's your special day." Well, we've been looking at venues, and Marcus knows this amazing place, the Cherokee Town and Country Club. They have this gorgeous ballroom that overlooks the golf course, and the gardens are just perfect for photos. I knew Cherokee Town and Country Club. Old money establishment. The kind of place that probably didn't let folks who looked like me through the front door until the federal government made them. But if that's where my daughter wanted to get married, I'd figure out how to make it happen. "What's it gonna cost, Monica?" She bit her lip in that way she used to when she was little and had broken something valuable. Well, that's the thing. Marcus's family usually handles weddings a certain way. Very elegant, very traditional. "How much, baby girl?" "The venue alone is $50,000. But Daddy, that's just the beginning. We're talking about a wedding for 300 people. Marcus has a lot of business associates who need to be there, and of course all of his family friends. 300 people at Cherokee Town and Country Club. I'd been to maybe 2 weddings in my entire life that had more than 100 guests, and those were church affairs with potluck receptions in the fellowship hall. "Monica, who are these 300 people? I don't think I know 300 people total." "Daddy, you don't understand. This isn't just about us. It's about making the right impression. Marcus's business depends on relationships, and a wedding is an important networking opportunity. A networking opportunity. My daughter's wedding day, reduced to a business function." "How much are we talking about total, Monica?" She took a deep breath like she was diving into deep water. "Marcus and I have been working with a wedding planner, and for the kind of event that would properly represent both our families, we're looking at around $900,000. $900,000. I had to grab the kitchen counter to keep from falling over. $900,000 for one day, for one party. That was more than some of the houses I'd built, more than most folks made in 20 years of hard work. "Monica, that's a lot of money, baby girl." "I know, Daddy. I know it sounds like a lot. But Marcus says his family spent over $1 million on his sister's wedding last year, and that was considered modest by their standards. Their standards. Everything kept coming back to their standards, their way of doing things, their world that my daughter was so desperate to be part of. Baby girl, I need some time to think about this." "Of course, Daddy, I understand. But we do need to start booking vendors soon. The good ones get reserved a year in advance." As I watched my children leave that night, Michael in his BMW, Monica in Marcus's Mercedes, MJ in the Audi I'd bought him for his birthday, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. They weren't visiting their father. They were visiting their bank. And somewhere along the way, I'd let them forget the difference. I spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with Monica's wedding request, pacing the floors of the house I'd built board by board, thinking about what Dolores would want me to do. Every time I walked past our bedroom, her perfume still faint on the pillows I couldn't bring myself to wash, I could almost hear her voice. "Sam, baby, she's our only daughter. You give her the wedding of her dreams." So I did what any father would do. I called Monica on Thursday morning and told her yes. "Daddy, oh my God, thank you so much. I knew you'd understand." Her squeal of delight through the phone almost made the $900,000 seem worth it. Almost. "You just make sure this Marcus boy treats you right, baby girl. That's all I ask." "He will, Daddy. He absolutely will. Oh, this is going to be the most beautiful wedding Atlanta has ever seen." Within 24 hours, I was sitting in the office of Vivian Ashworth, Atlanta's most exclusive wedding planner. Her Buckhead office looked like a museum, all white furniture, crystal chandeliers, and photographs of celebrity weddings she'd supposedly planned. The woman herself was a stick-thin blonde who spoke in hushed, reverent tones, like we were discussing state secrets instead of flower arrangements. "Mr. Washington," she purred, spreading glossy photographs across her glass desk. "Monica and Marcus have such exquisite taste. This is going to be a truly spectacular event." Monica sat beside me, practically vibrating with excitement as Vivian walked us through the details. Cherokee Town and Country Club for the venue, $50,000 just to walk in the door. Flowers from some hotshot designer who flew in arrangements from Ecuador. 35,000. A 12-piece orchestra because a DJ wasn't sophisticated enough. 20,000. A photographer who'd supposedly shot weddings for Hollywood stars. 15,000. And for the dress, Vivian continued, sliding another photo across the table. We've secured an appointment with Kleinfeld in New York. Monica will need at least 3 fittings, of course. 3 fittings for one dress? Oh, Mr. Washington. Vivian laughed like I'd just asked if the sky was blue. This isn't just any dress. We're talking about a custom Vera Wang creation. The initial consultation alone is 10,000, but for a bride of Monica's caliber, my daughter, who'd never earned a paycheck that didn't have my signature on it, apparently had a caliber that required a dress worth more than most folks' cars. But I bit my tongue and nodded along, writing check after check as Vivian outlined each extravagant detail. Ice sculptures, imported champagne, a 7-course dinner prepared by a James Beard award-winning chef, vintage Bentleys for transportation, custom linens shipped from Italy. The invitations alone will be works of art, Vivian gushed. Hand calligraphy on paper made from Egyptian cotton with real gold leaf accents. Each invitation suite will cost approximately $300 to produce. $300 per invitation. For 300 guests. Nearly $100,000 just to tell people when and where to show up. Marcus arrived halfway through our meeting, breezing in like he owned the place and air-kissing Vivian like they were old friends, which I learned they were. Vivian planned my sister Ashley's wedding last year, he explained, settling into the chair beside Monica like a king taking his throne. Absolutely flawless event. The Charleston Society pages called it the wedding of the decade. Well, we certainly want to match that standard, Vivian replied, her eyes practically turning into dollar signs. Perhaps even exceed it. For the next hour, I watched my daughter transform before my eyes. The girl who used to be happy with a birthday cake from Kroger was now debating the merits of different types of caviar service. The young woman who'd cried tears of joy over her first car, a used Honda Civic I'd bought her for graduation, was now discussing whether the bridal party should arrive by helicopter or vintage Rolls-Royce. "Marcus, darling," she said at one point, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "Don't you think the champagne fountain would be a lovely touch for the cocktail hour?" "Absolutely, sweetheart. Nothing but the finest for my future wife." The finest. Everything had to be the finest, the most exclusive, the most expensive. Not because it was better, but because it cost more. Because it would impress people who measured worth in dollars instead of character. I signed the contract that afternoon, a 20-page document that laid out every detail of what Vivian kept calling the event of the season. The total came to $875,000, with a 10% contingency buffer bringing it to just over $960,000. "Don't worry about the overage, Daddy," Monica said as we left Vivian's office. "I'm sure we can stay within budget." But I'd been in construction long enough to know that budgets were just suggestions, especially when the person spending the money hadn't earned it themselves. The next few months were a whirlwind of appointments, fittings, tastings, and consultations. Every week brought a new vendor meeting, a new decision, a new check to write. Monica threw herself into wedding planning like it was a full-time job, which I suppose it was, considering she'd quit her marketing position to focus on becoming Mrs. Marcus Richmond III. "I can't possibly work while planning a wedding of this magnitude," she explained when I asked about her sudden unemployment. "Vivian says the most successful society weddings require the bride's complete attention. So not only was I funding the wedding, I was back to supporting Monica while she planned it. Her rent, her car payment, her credit cards, her spa treatments, her shopping trips to find the perfect shoes to match the perfect dress for the perfect wedding." The warning signs were there, bright as construction cones on a highway, but I ignored them all. Like the way Marcus would show up late to vendor meetings, always on some urgent business call that couldn't wait. Like how he'd contradict decisions Monica had made, overruling her choices with casual dismissiveness. "Actually, Vivian, let's go with the lobster instead of the chicken," he'd say, not bothering to ask Monica what she preferred. The Richmond family has certain expectations about wedding fare, or the way he'd talk about our families like they were equivalent, when his family's money came from 5 generations of accumulated wealth, and mine came from 40 years of getting up before dawn and working until my hands bled. The worst was during our cake tasting at some fancy bakery in Virginia Highland. We were sampling different flavors, each slice costing more than most people's entire wedding cakes, when Marcus's phone rang. "Sorry, this is important," he said, stepping away to take the call while Monica and I continued tasting. I watched my daughter's face as she tried a piece of chocolate ganache creation that cost $3,000. She looked tired. Not happy bride-to-be tired, but genuinely exhausted, like she was carrying a weight she couldn't put down. "You okay, baby girl?" "Oh, I'm fine, Daddy. Just a lot to coordinate, you know." But something in her voice didn't sound fine. It sounded strained, like she was forcing brightness into words that wanted to come out flat. "Monica, you know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's bothering you—" "Nothing's bothering me, Daddy. I'm marrying the man of my dreams and having the wedding I've always wanted. What could be wrong?" But her smile didn't reach her eyes, and when Marcus returned from his call, I watched how she straightened up, put that perfect smile back in place, became the version of herself that he seemed to expect. "Sorry about that," Marcus said, not sounding sorry at all. "Crisis at the office. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was, actually. In 40 years of running Washington construction, I'd never taken a call during my daughter's cake tasting that couldn't wait an hour. But then again, I'd never considered making money more important than making memories. The final vendor meeting was at the Florist, some high-end place that charged more for centerpieces than most folks spent on their entire wedding. Monica had fallen in love with these elaborate arrangements. Orchids flown in from Thailand, roses from Ecuador, all arranged in crystal vases that cost $500 each. "It's a bit over budget," the florist admitted, spreading the revised estimate across her desk, "but the effect will be absolutely stunning." A bit over budget. $15,000 over budget, to be exact. "Daddy?" Monica looked at me with those eyes that had been melting my resolve since she was 3 years old. "They're just so beautiful." I looked at the numbers, at the photographs of flowers that would be dead and thrown away within 24 hours, at my daughter's hopeful face, and I nodded. "If that's what you want, baby girl." "Oh, thank you, Daddy. You're the best father in the world. The best father in the world." A man who'd say yes to anything, sign any check, fund any dream, no matter how extravagant or wasteful. A man who'd built a fortune through careful planning and smart decisions, now watching it flow away like water through a broken dam. But I told myself it was worth it. This was my only daughter, my baby girl, Dolores's pride and joy. If she wanted flowers from Thailand and champagne from France and a dress that cost more than my first house, then she'd have them. I just didn't realize that what I was really buying wasn't my daughter's happiness. I was buying my own humiliation, and the bill was about to come due in ways I never could have imagined. The moment that changed everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon in October, 3 weeks before the wedding. I'd driven over to Cherokee Town and Country Club for what Vivian called a final venue walkthrough, basically a last chance to make sure every detail was perfect before the big day. I should have known something was wrong the moment I pulled into the club's circular drive. My pickup truck, a 2018 Ford F-250, clean and well-maintained but clearly a work vehicle, stood out among the luxury cars like a sore thumb. The valet, a young black man about my grandson's age, gave me a look that said everything about how often folks like me showed up at places like this. "Are you here for a delivery, sir?" he asked, barely glancing at me. "No, son. I'm here for the Richmond, Washington wedding planning meeting." His eyebrows shot up, and I could see him trying to reconcile my appearance with the kind of money it took to book this place. But he handed me a claim ticket and pointed toward the main entrance with newfound respect. The club's interior was all old Southern grandeur, massive chandeliers, oil paintings of long-dead white men, and mahogany furniture that probably cost more than most folks' yearly salary. Everything designed to make you feel either impressed or intimidated, depending on which side of the velvet rope you belonged on. I found Monica, Marcus, and Vivian in the ballroom, standing near the windows that overlooked the perfectly manicured golf course. Monica looked stunning in a blue dress that probably cost more than my first car, but there was something tight around her eyes, a tension I'd been noticing more and more lately. "Daddy." She rushed over to hug me, and for a moment she was just my little girl again, not the society bride-to-be she'd been pretending to be for months. Hey there, baby girl. How's everything looking? Oh, it's perfect, Daddy. Just perfect. Wait until you see what they've planned for the ceremony setup. But Marcus barely acknowledged my arrival, too busy barking instructions at the catering manager about the proper temperature for serving the imported champagne. When he finally turned to greet me, it was with that same limp handshake and condescending smile I'd come to despise. "Samuel," he said, like we were casual acquaintances instead of soon-to-be family. "Glad you could make it. We're just going over some final details." Final details that, I quickly learned, involved spending even more money. The lighting wasn't quite right, so they needed to bring in additional fixtures at $8,000. The dance floor needed special treatment to achieve the perfect gleam, another $3,000. The ice sculpture wasn't large enough to make the proper impression on the guests, $5,000 more. "These are necessary adjustments," Vivian explained in that breathless way of hers, like we were discussing matters of national security. For an event of this caliber, every detail must be absolutely flawless. I nodded and smiled and wrote the checks, watching my daughter's face light up with each additional expense. But I was also watching Marcus, and what I saw was making my blood pressure rise with every passing minute. He treated Monica like a beautiful accessory, patting her head when she made suggestions, dismissing her opinions with a patronizing smile, making decisions about her own wedding without bothering to consult her. When she mentioned wanting to change the processional music to something more personal, a song that had meant something to her and Dolores, Marcus cut her off mid-sentence. "Darling, we've already discussed this. Wagner's bridal chorus is traditional. It's what the Richmond family expects." "But Marcus," I just thought, "Monica, sweetheart, you have to trust me on these things. I know what's appropriate for this level of event." I watched my daughter's face fall, saw her swallow whatever word she'd been about to say, and felt something dark and angry start churning in my gut. But I kept my mouth shut, telling myself this wasn't my business, that they were adults who needed to work out their own relationship dynamics. The breaking point came during our meeting with the club's general manager, a thin, nervous man named Patterson, who kept referring to Marcus as Mr. Richmond and me as simply Sir, when he bothered to acknowledge me at all. We were discussing the final seating arrangements when Patterson mentioned a small issue with the guest list. "Mr. Richmond, we've reviewed the names you've submitted, and there are a few guests who don't meet our usual membership standards. Perhaps we could arrange for alternative accommodations." "What kind of alternative accommodations?" Monica asked, but Marcus held up a hand to silence her. "Who are we talking about?" Marcus asked. Patterson glanced nervously at me, then back at Marcus. "Well, there are several guests from the bride's side who might be more comfortable at the overflow reception in the smaller ballroom." The overflow reception. A separate, smaller party for the guests who weren't good enough for the main event. I felt heat rising in my face as the implications sank in. "Let me guess," I said, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. "You're talking about my family, my friends from church, the folks who helped raise Monica." Patterson's face went red as a Georgia sunset. "Sir, it's not personal. It's just that Cherokee Town and Country Club has certain standards." Standards. I stood up, all 6'3" of me, and watched Patterson take a step backward. "What kind of standards are we talking about here, Mr. Patterson?" "Daddy, please," Monica whispered, but I was past caring about keeping the peace. "No, baby girl. I want to understand. See, I'm the one writing the checks for this whole dog and pony show. Nearly $1 million of my money is going into this wedding, but apparently some of my guests aren't good enough to eat the food I'm paying for." Marcus cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice had that edge I'd heard him use on the phone with business associates. Cold, dismissive, final. "Samuel, you have to understand, this is how things work in our circles. There are expectations, protocols. My family has been members here for 3 generations. We can't just ignore the club's standards because..." "Because what, Marcus? Because my money isn't as good as your family's money? Because the folks who raised my daughter aren't fancy enough for your fancy friends?" "That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm simply explaining that there are appropriate ways to handle these situations. Perhaps you're more casual. Guests would be happier in a less formal setting. More casual guests. Like my sister Ruth, who'd worked 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school. Like Pastor Williams, who'd married Dolores and me and baptized all 3 of my children. Like Jerome, My uncle, who'd taught me everything I knew about construction and whose arthritis-gnarled hands had built half the houses in the 4th Ward. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice level through sheer force of will, "these people aren't casual anything. They're family. They're the reason Monica exists, the reason she had the opportunities that brought her to you." Of course, I didn't mean to imply—" "Yes, you did." The words came out harder than I intended, echoing off the ballroom's high ceilings. "You meant to imply exactly what you said, that my family isn't good enough for your family's club." Monica was looking back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match, her face pale with panic. "Daddy, Marcus, please, can't we just—" "Monica, darling," Marcus said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that made my teeth ache. "Why don't you let the men handle this? This is business, not something you need to worry your pretty head about. Let the men handle this. Don't worry your pretty head about it, at your own wedding planning meeting." That's when something inside me snapped like a rotten support beam. "Boy," I said, stepping closer to Marcus until he had to crane his neck to look up at me. "Did you just tell my daughter, the bride, the woman this whole circus is supposedly for, to let the men handle decisions about her own wedding?" "I simply meant that financial negotiations are—" "Financial negotiations?" I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Son, there's no negotiation here. There's my money paying for everything, and there's you acting like you're doing me a favor by letting me write the checks. Samuel, I think you're misunderstanding the situation." "No, Marcus, I think I'm understanding it just fine for the first time." I looked around the ballroom, at the crystal chandeliers and marble floors and windows overlooking the golf course, where men like Marcus played while men like me worked. "This whole thing isn't about Monica's happiness. It's about you showing off for your country club friends, using my daughter as a prop and my money as the budget. That's completely unfair." "Is it? Tell me, Marcus, how much of this $1 million wedding are you contributing? Besides your opinions and your family's expectations, what exactly are you bringing to the table?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. Patterson had backed against the wall like he wanted to disappear through it. And Monica was staring at her fiancé with an expression I'd never seen before, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "Well," I pressed, "I'm genuinely curious, because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm funding your entire social debut, and you're treating my family like hired help at our own party." That's when Marcus made the mistake that sealed his fate. Instead of apologizing, instead of showing even a shred of humility or respect, he straightened his tie and looked at me with pure contempt. "Samuel, I think you're forgetting something important. This is how real families handle weddings. This is how things work in established society. Perhaps if you understood the significance of tradition and proper protocol, you'd appreciate what we're trying to accomplish here. Real families, established society. 40 years of building a business from nothing, of raising 3 children, of loving a woman until cancer took her away, of working 16-hour days to give my family opportunities I never had, and this boy was telling me I didn't understand how real families worked." I looked at Monica, my baby girl, the daughter I'd have moved mountains for, and saw her standing there in silence while her fiancé insulted everything I'd built, everything I represented, everything that had made her life possible. "Monica," I said quietly, "are you going to let him talk about your family like that?" She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Marcus, looked at me, and said the words that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. "Daddy, Marcus has a point. Maybe we should try to understand their perspective. Their perspective. Not our perspective. Not her perspective. Theirs." In that moment, standing in that ballroom surrounded by luxury I'd paid for, watching my daughter choose her fiancé's contempt over her father's dignity, I realized something that hit me harder than a sledgehammer to the chest. I'd lost her already. Somewhere in the months of wedding planning and social climbing and trying to fit into Marcus's world, I'd lost my daughter to people who would never see her as anything more than a pretty face attached to a useful bank account. Just like they'd never see me as anything more than the man whose money made their little fantasy possible. But I was about to show them exactly what happened when you mistake generosity for weakness and stupidity. I drove home from Cherokee Town and Country Club in a white-hot rage that took every ounce of self-control I possessed to keep from wrapping my truck around the nearest oak tree. My hands were shaking so hard I had to pull over twice just to get my breathing under control. For 40 years, I'd built my life on the principle that if you treated people with respect and dignity, you'd get the same in return. But sitting in my driveway, staring at the house I'd built with my own hands for the family I'd loved with my whole heart, I realized I'd been a fool. I'd raised children who saw me as an ATM machine. I'd funded a wedding for a man who treated my family like servants. And I'd watched my own daughter choose social status over family loyalty without even blinking. But the rage that burned in my chest wasn't just anger. It was clarity. The kind of cold, focused clarity that came when you finally stopped making excuses and started seeing things exactly as they were. I walked into my home office, poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, and started making phone calls. The first call was to Harold Garrett, my accountant for the past 20 years. Harold was a no-nonsense man who'd helped me navigate every financial decision since Washington construction started turning real profit. Sam, good to hear from you. How's the wedding planning going? That's what I'm calling about, Harold. I need you to pull together some numbers for me. Everything I've spent on my children over the past 5 years. Every check, every payment, every investment. I want it all documented. There was a pause on the line. Sam, is everything okay? Everything's about to be just fine, Harold. But I need those numbers first thing tomorrow morning. All right. I'll get Sarah working on it tonight. Should I include the business loans to Michael? The monthly allowances? Everything, Harold. Every single penny. The second call was to Margaret Williams, the best family law attorney in Atlanta and the wife of my pastor. Margaret had handled the legal side of Washington construction for years, and I trusted her judgment completely. Samuel Washington, it's been too long. How can I help you? Margaret, I need to understand my legal obligations regarding wedding expenses. If I've contracted to pay for services but haven't received them yet, can I cancel those contracts? Depends on the specific terms, but generally speaking, if you're the signatory on the contracts and the services haven't been rendered, you have options. Are we talking about Monica's wedding? We are. And Margaret, I need to know about gift giving versus loans. If I've been supporting my adult children financially, what are my legal rights to stop that support? Another pause. Margaret was sharp enough to read between the lines. Samuel, gifts are gifts. Once given, they're gone. But ongoing financial support to adult children isn't a legal obligation unless there's a specific agreement in place. And if you suspect financial exploitation, what if I can document a pattern of manipulation? Requests for money based on false pretenses? Then we might be talking about a different conversation entirely. Samuel, I think you need to come in tomorrow. Bring Harold's documentation and let's have a proper discussion about your options. The third call was the hardest one. I dialed Jerome's number, knowing my uncle would still be up watching the late news despite being 78 years old. Sam, boy, you sound terrible. What's wrong? Uncle Jerome, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. When have I ever been anything else? When you look at my children, really look at them, what do you see? Jerome was quiet for a long moment. My uncle had never been one to sugarcoat hard truths, but he also didn't believe in speaking ill of family unless absolutely necessary. Sam, you want me to tell you what I see, or you want me to tell you what you want to hear? The truth, Uncle Jerome, nothing but. All right then. I see 3 grown people who never learned the value of $1 because they never had to earn one. I see children who love what you can do for them more than they love who you are. And I see a good man who's been taken advantage of by the people he trusted most. The words hit me like physical blows, but they also felt like relief. Someone else had seen what I'd been too blind or too stubborn to acknowledge. Uncle Jerome, what would you do? Boy, I'd teach them what the real world looks like without Daddy's checkbook. Sometimes the only way people learn to stand is when you stop carrying them. After I hung up, I sat in my office until nearly 3 in the morning, going through file cabinets and desk drawers, gathering every document related to my children's financial dependence. Bank statements, canceled checks, loan agreements, investment records, the paper trail of 20 years of generosity that had been mistaken for weakness. By dawn, I had 3 neat stacks on my desk, one for each of my ungrateful children. Michael's stack was the smallest but the most damaging. Business loans that had never been repaid, equipment purchases for his construction crew, a down payment on his house that was supposed to be temporary assistance. Total, $247,000 over 5 years. MJ's stack was the thickest. Monthly allowances, rent payments, car payments, credit card bailouts, emergency loans that were never emergencies and never loans. The boy had cost me $156,000 in 5 years and had never once said thank you without immediately asking for more. Monica's stack was somewhere in between, but when I added in the wedding expenses, it dwarfed the others. $89,000 in direct support over 5 years, plus the $973,000 I'd already committed to her fairy tale wedding. Over $1 million for a daughter who'd stood by silently while her fiancé insulted everything I'd built. Harold arrived at 8 a.m. sharp with a manila folder thick as a phone book. "Sam, I've never seen anything like this," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "In 5 years, you've transferred or committed nearly $1.4 million to your children. That's not including the business opportunities, the connections, the property they've had access to. And what do I have to show for it, Harold? 3 adult children who've never learned to support themselves and a wedding that's going to cost more than most people's houses." Harold spread the detailed reports across my desk, and together we went through every line item. The picture that emerged was devastating. My children hadn't just been living off my generosity. They'd been bleeding me dry while giving back nothing but demands for more. "Harold, if I wanted to stop all financial support immediately, what would that look like?" "Well, anything you've already paid for, that's done. But ongoing commitments, allowances, rent payments, business loans, those you can terminate with proper notice. The wedding contracts are trickier, but if you're the signatory and you want to cancel, what's my financial exposure?" Harold pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. "Worst case scenario, you might be liable for cancellation fees and deposits, but we're talking maybe $100,000 in penalties versus $900,000 in total costs. $800,000. That was the difference between funding my daughter's social climbing fantasy and keeping my dignity intact." Margaret arrived at 10, took one look at the documentation spread across my desk, and whistled low. "Samuel, this isn't just family dysfunction. This is financial exploitation. Your children have been systematically extracting wealth from you while contributing nothing to the family enterprise. What are my options, Margaret? Legally, you can cut off all voluntary financial support immediately. Morally, that's between you and your conscience, but I'll tell you this. If these were strangers treating you this way, we'd call it fraud." She walked me through the process of terminating the various financial arrangements I'd made with my children. Cancel the monthly transfers, call the loans due immediately, revoke the credit cards I'd been paying for, stop the automatic payments for rent and car notes and insurance premiums. "What about the wedding contracts?" I asked. "You signed them. You're responsible for cancellation fees. But Samuel, if you're determined to do this, better to pay penalties now than fund a wedding for people who don't respect you. And if they try to challenge any of this?" Margaret smiled grimly. "They can try. But gift-giving isn't a legal obligation, and financial support for adult children isn't legally required. If they want to take their own father to court over money he earned and they didn't, well, that tells you everything you need to know about their character." After Margaret left, I sat alone in my office, staring at the phone numbers for every wedding vendor, every contractor, every service provider I'd hired for Monica's dream wedding. One by one, I started making calls. The first call was to Vivian Ashworth. Her assistant tried to put me off, claiming Vivian was in meetings all day, but I'd been dealing with gatekeepers longer than that girl had been alive. "You tell Miss Ashworth that Samuel Washington needs to speak with her immediately about the Richmond, Washington wedding. And you tell her that if she's too busy to take this call, she's going to be too busy to collect the remaining balance on her contract." Vivian was on the line within 2 minutes. "Mr.
Washington, how wonderful to hear from you. I was just reviewing the final details for Monica's special day." "Vivian, I'm calling to cancel the wedding." Dead silence. Then, "I'm sorry, did you say cancel?" "Mr. Washington, the wedding is in 3 weeks. Everything's been ordered. Deposits have been paid." "I understand there will be penalties. Send me the cancellation paperwork and the final bill." I'll settle up within 48 hours. But Mr.
Washington, surely this is just pre-wedding jitters. Every father gets emotional before his daughter's big day. Vivian, this isn't about emotions. This is about business, my business, and I'm closing this particular account. One by one, I canceled everything. The venue, the flowers, the orchestra, the photographer, the transportation, the dress fittings. Each call brought the same shocked silence, the same attempts to talk me out of it, the same threats about cancellation fees. I didn't care about the fees. What I cared about was my dignity, my self-respect, and teaching my children a lesson that was 40 years overdue. By 6 o'clock that evening, I dismantled Monica's dream wedding as methodically as I'd once demolished condemned buildings. All that remained was to tell my children what I'd done and why I'd done it. But first, I had one more call to make. To the community center where Dolores and I had met, where we'd volunteered for 20 years, where we'd dreamed of leaving a legacy that mattered. Pastor Williams, it's Sam Washington. I've got a proposition for you about that new community center you've been wanting to build. It was time to put my money where it could do some real good, with people who actually deserved it. The phone started ringing at 7:30 the next morning. Vivian Ashworth, in full panic mode, her voice high and breathless like she'd been running marathons. Mr. Washington, I've been on the phone with vendors all night. The cancellation fees are substantial. Surely we can work something out. Perhaps a smaller ceremony, a more intimate gathering. Vivian, I told you yesterday, send me the final bill. I'll pay what I owe and not a penny more. But what am I supposed to tell the other vendors? The Richmond family? Monica? Tell them the truth, Vivian. Tell them that Samuel Washington changed his mind about funding a wedding where his family wasn't welcome at their own table. I hung up and poured myself coffee, waiting for the storm I knew was coming. It arrived at 8:15 in the form of Monica's car screeching into my driveway. She burst through my front door without knocking, still in her pajamas and robe, mascara streaked down her face like she'd been crying all night. Daddy, what have you done? Vivian called me at 6 a.m. saying you canceled everything. The wedding is ruined. Everything is ruined. I set down my coffee cup and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. Even in her distress, even with tears streaming down her face, there was something in her posture that told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't asking why I'd canceled the wedding. She wasn't trying to understand what had driven me to such a drastic decision. She was angry that I'd dared to stop paying for her fantasy. Sit down, Monica. I don't want to sit down. I want you to fix this. Call Vivian back. Tell her it was a mistake, that you were just upset about something. Monica, sit down. Something in my voice must have gotten through to her because she finally stopped pacing and perched on the edge of the couch like a bird ready to take flight. Now, I said, settling into my recliner, I want you to think real careful about your next words, because depending on what comes out of your mouth, we might still be able to salvage our relationship. Daddy, I don't understand why you're doing this. You promised me the wedding of my dreams. You said, I said a lot of things. And I kept every promise I made until your fiancé decided that my family wasn't good enough to eat the food I was paying for. That's not what Marcus meant. Monica, stop. I held up my hand, and for once in her life, she actually listened. I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Yesterday, at that club, when Marcus suggested that my family should be put in a separate room because we weren't up to their standards, what did you think about that? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away toward the window where Dolores's roses were blooming in their final glory before winter. I thought maybe he had a point about keeping things organized. Wrong answer. The words came out harder than I'd intended, echoing off the walls of the living room where I'd taught her to walk, where we'd opened Christmas presents, where Dolores had read her bedtime stories every night for 16 years. Monica, let me tell you what the right answer should have been. The right answer should have been, Marcus, these are the people who raised me, who loved me, who made this wedding possible. If they're not good enough for Cherokee Town and Country Club, then Cherokee Town and Country Club isn't good enough for my wedding. Tears started flowing down her cheeks again, but I wasn't done. Instead, you stood there silent while he insulted your family. You let him talk down to your father like I was some kind of hired help, and when I called you on it, you took his side. Daddy, it's not that simple. Yes, Monica, it is exactly that simple. Family loyalty is simple. Respect is simple. Either you stand with the people who raised you, or you don't. There's no middle ground. She was crying harder now, but I could see the anger building behind her tears. The same anger I'd seen in her face when she was 16 and I wouldn't let her go to some party where I knew there'd be drinking and no supervision. So you're punishing me because Marcus said something stupid? You're destroying my wedding because of one conversation? One conversation? I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Monica, this has been building for years. You think I haven't noticed how you only call when you need money? How you quit your job to plan a wedding instead of building a career? How you've spent the last 6 months turning into someone your mama wouldn't recognize? Don't you dare bring Mama into this. Why not? She's the reason I agreed to pay for this circus in the first place. I thought I was honoring her memory by giving you the wedding she always dreamed of. But Dolores would never have dreamed of a wedding where her own family wasn't welcome. Monica stood up abruptly, pacing again, her robe billowing behind her like she was some kind of tragic heroine in a soap opera. Fine, fine. Marcus said some things he shouldn't have. But Daddy, we can fix this. We can have the ceremony somewhere else. Somewhere more inclusive. With what money, Monica? With the money you already committed. With the money you promised me. And there it was. The crux of the whole thing. Not an apology for her fiancé's behavior. Not a recognition that she'd chosen social status over family loyalty. Just a demand that I keep funding her fantasy, regardless of how I'd been treated. Monica, I didn't promise you money. I promised you a wedding. And a wedding is supposed to be about love and family and commitment, not about impressing people who think your daddy isn't good enough to breathe their air. But what am I supposed to tell people? What am I supposed to tell Marcus? Tell them the truth. Tell them that actions have consequences. Tell them that if you want to join a family that looks down on working people, you better be prepared to pay for the privilege yourself. That's when she exploded. You're being ridiculous. You're being petty and vindictive and cruel. This is my wedding, Daddy. My one special day, and you're destroying it because your feelings got hurt. My feelings got hurt. 20 years of sacrifice, of putting her needs before my own, of working 70-hour weeks to give her opportunities I never had, reduced to hurt feelings. Monica, let me ask you something. In the 5 years since you graduated college, how much money have I given you? I don't know, Daddy. I don't keep track of $89,000. Plus the wedding expenses. That's not counting the car, the insurance, the credit cards I've been paying off, the emergencies that somehow always required my checkbook. Her face went pale. In those same 5 years, how much money have you contributed to this family? How much have you helped with your grandmother's medical bills? How much did you contribute when we buried your mama? How many times have you offered to help with anything that didn't directly benefit you? Silence. I'll save you the math, baby girl. The answer is 0. Not 1 penny, not 1 offer, not 1 moment where you put someone else's needs ahead of your own wants. That's not fair. What's not fair is a grown woman who's never worked a day without a safety net telling her father that he's being cruel for refusing to fund her social climbing. The front door opened, and Marcus walked in like he owned the place. He was dressed in another expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, his face set in that arrogant expression I'd come to despise. Samuel, we need to talk. Boy, you better learn to knock before you come into my house. Monica called me in tears. I understand you've made some rash decisions about the wedding. Rash decisions. This entitled little weasel thought 40 years of hard work and accumulated wisdom amounted to rash decisions. Marcus, the only rash decision I made was agreeing to fund this circus in the first place. Look, I understand you're upset about yesterday. Perhaps I could have phrased things more diplomatically, but you have to understand, there are social protocols, established ways of doing things. Are you apologizing, Marcus? He straightened his tie, that nervous habit of his when he was caught off guard. I'm explaining the situation from a more mature perspective. A more mature perspective. This boy, who'd never earned $1 in his life, who'd inherited everything he had, who treated my daughter like a trophy, and my family like servants, was lecturing me about maturity. Marcus, let me give you some mature perspective. You're not getting married in 3 weeks. You're not getting married on my dime. And if you ever set foot in my house again without permission, you're going to find out exactly how mature a man gets when he's been disrespected in his own home. You can't be serious. Monica, tell him he can't be serious. Monica looked back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match, tears still streaming down her face. But instead of defending me or apologizing for her fiancé's continued arrogance, she did something that broke my heart all over again. Daddy, please. Marcus's family will help with the wedding costs. We can work something out. Please don't do this. Marcus's family will help. After 6 months of planning a wedding with my money, after Marcus had made it clear that his family considered mine to be second-class citizens, after everything that had been said and done, my daughter was still begging me to keep funding their fantasy. Monica, do you love this man? Of course I do, Daddy. Do you respect him? Do you think he's going to treat you the way you deserve to be treated? Yes, Then marry him. Nobody's stopping you. Get a marriage license, go to the courthouse, have Pastor Williams perform the ceremony in the church where you were baptized. Invite the people who actually love you, serve cake and punch in the fellowship hall, and start your life together. But that's not the wedding we planned. No, Monica, it's not the wedding you planned with my money. But if you really love this man, if he really loves you, then all that other stuff, the flowers from Ecuador, the imported champagne, the crystal chandeliers, none of that matters. Marcus was turning red, his composure finally cracking. This is absurd. Monica, we can't possibly get married in some church basement. What would people think? What would people think? I stepped closer to Marcus, and he backed toward the door. People would think that a man who really loved my daughter would marry her anywhere, anytime, under any circumstances. They'd think that a man who was worthy of her would be grateful to join a family that raised such a remarkable woman. Samuel, you're being completely unreasonable. I'm being unreasonable? Boy, you came into my house demanding that I fund your social debut while treating my family like we should be grateful for the privilege. You want to see unreasonable? I walked to the front door and opened it wide. Get out of my house, both of you. Monica, you call me when you're ready to have an adult conversation about family, respect, and what really matters in life. Until then, you know where to find me. Monica stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Part shock, part anger, part something that might have been the first glimmer of understanding. Daddy, you can't mean this. I've never meant anything more in my life, baby girl. They left. Marcus stormed out first, already on his phone before he reached his car. Monica lingered in the doorway for a moment, looking back like she wanted to say something else, but she didn't. And as I watched them drive away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The silence in my house after Monica and Marcus left was deafening, but it wasn't the empty silence of loneliness. It was the clean silence that comes after you finally stop pretending everything's fine and start dealing with reality. I spent the rest of that morning making phone calls, and for the first time in months, they were phone calls that actually made me feel good about myself. The first call was to Pastor Williams at New Hope Baptist, the church where Dolores and I had been married, where all 3 children had been baptized, where I'd served as a deacon for 15 years. Pastor, it's Sam Washington. You got time to talk about that community center project? Sam, Lord knows we've been praying for a miracle on that front. The old building's about ready to fall down, and these kids need somewhere safe to go after school. But the estimates we got were just... He trailed off, probably remembering that I was in the construction business. How much you need, Pastor? Well, we got estimates ranging from $400,000 to $600,000, depending on how fancy we want to get. But Sam, we've only raised about $50,000 so far, and that's been 2 years of bake sales and car washes. Pastor, what if I told you I could build you something really special for $500,000? Something that would serve this community for the next 50 years? Dead silence. Then, Sam, are you serious? Serious as a heart attack. I just freed up some money that was going to be wasted on foolishness, and I can't think of a better way to spend it than building something that would make Dolores proud. Pastor Williams started crying right there on the phone, thanking God and me in the same breath. We set up a meeting for that afternoon to go over the plans and the site survey. The second call was to my cousin Denise in Birmingham, Alabama. Denise was a single mother working 2 jobs to put her daughter Keisha through Spelman College. Smart girl, studying engineering, the kind of young woman who deserved every opportunity in the world. "Cousin Sam, what a surprise! How you doing?" "I'm doing fine, Denise. How's Keisha's school going?" "Oh, she's doing wonderful. Dean's List every semester. Already got 2 internship offers for next summer. I'm so proud I could bust." "What about her tuition situation?" Denise's voice got quieter. "Well, we're managing. Between her scholarship and my jobs, we're getting by. She took out some loans for the last 2 years, but nothing we can't handle." "How much she owe?" "Sam, you don't need to worry about—" "Denise, how much?" "About $35,000. But Sam, I know money's been tight since Dolores passed, and with Monica's wedding coming up, Monica's wedding got canceled, and I want to pay off Keisha's loans." Silence. Then Denise started crying, and I found myself getting choked up too. This was what family was supposed to feel like. People who supported each other because they loved each other, not because they expected something in return. The third call was to my sister Ruth in Memphis. Ruth had been a nurse for 25 years, working the night shift at Methodist Hospital, and she'd been trying to save up enough money to buy a little house for herself and my nephew Joshua, who was 16 and showing real promise as a football player. "Sam, honey, how you holding up?" "I'm doing better than I have in months, Ruth." "Listen, you still looking for a house?" "Well, yeah, but the market's so crazy right now. These real estate folks want 30, 40,000 down, and at my age, I'm not sure I want to be paying on a mortgage until I'm 70. What if you didn't have to worry about a mortgage?" "Sam, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about buying you a house, Ruth. Cash. Something nice, something safe, with a good yard for Joshua to practice in." My sister went quiet for so long I thought the line had gone dead. "Ruth? Sam Washington, are you having some kind of breakdown?" I laughed, and it felt good. Really good. "No, Ruth. I think I'm finally having a breakthrough." By noon, I'd committed $400,000 to worthy causes and family members who actually deserved help. Not to show off, not to buy love or loyalty, but because it was the right thing to do. Because these were people who would appreciate the help and use it to build something meaningful. The afternoon brought a different kind of phone call. Michael, my oldest, calling from a construction site, his voice tight with panic. "Dad, what the hell is going on? My bank called and said you put a hold on the equipment loan. I got guys standing around with nothing to do because the excavator's being repossessed. Michael, we need to talk, face to face. I can't leave the job site. We're already behind schedule. Then I'll come to you." I found Michael at a subdivision project in Alpharetta, standing next to a half-built foundation, yelling at his crew about productivity while sweat poured down his face. When he saw me pull up, he stormed over to my truck like a man looking for a fight. "Dad, you need to call the bank right now and straighten this mess out. I got contracts to fulfill, deadlines to meet." "Michael, slow down. Take a breath." "I don't have time to take a breath. Do you have any idea what this is going to cost me? The penalties for missing deadlines alone." "Son, sit down." There was something in my voice that cut through his panic. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. "Dad, are you okay? You look different." "I feel different, clearer, like I finally stopped fooling myself about a lot of things." I pulled out the folder Harold had prepared, the one documenting every dollar I'd loaned or given to my children over the past 5 years. "Michael, in 5 years, I've loaned you $247,000 for your business. Equipment, operating capital, that down payment on your house. How much of that have you paid back?" His face went pale. "Dad, we talked about this. Those were investments in the family business. You said—" "I said a lot of things. But investments are supposed to generate returns. Loans are supposed to be repaid. What I've been doing is subsidizing your lifestyle while you pretend to be a successful businessman. That's not fair. What's not fair is a grown man who can't make his business profitable without his daddy's money. What's not fair is watching you cut corners on jobs, treat workers like dirt, and then come to me when the bills come due." Michael's jaw was working like he was chewing nails. "So what? You're just going to destroy everything I've built?" "Michael, you haven't built anything. You've been playing businessman with my money and my reputation, and that ends now. Dad, please, I need this loan, just this one time, and then I'll pay everything back, I swear." "How many times have I heard that, son?
How many just this one-time conversations have we had? He looked at his crew, standing around waiting for instructions, then back at me. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to help me on job sites, eager to learn, proud of honest work. What do you want me to do, Dad? I want you to figure out how to run a business without my money. I want you to learn what it means to succeed or fail based on your own efforts. And Michael? Yeah, I want you to start treating your workers the way I treated mine, with respect, because the way you've been acting, you're not the man I raised. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked back toward his crew without another word. The drive home gave me time to think about what I was really doing. Some folks might call it cruel, cutting off my children's financial support without warning. But I'd been in construction long enough to know that sometimes you had to tear down what was structurally unsound before you could build something that would last. That evening, MJ showed up at my door. Not in crisis mode like Monica, not angry like Michael, but with that hangdog expression he'd perfected as a teenager when he wanted something. Hey, Dad. MJ, come on in. He settled onto the couch, and I could see him trying to figure out his approach. MJ had always been the most strategic of my children, the one who understood that different situations required different tactics. Dad, I heard about Monica's wedding. That's rough, man. I know how much you were looking forward to walking her down the aisle. Were you, MJ? Looking forward to it? Of course, I mean, it was going to be beautiful. Monica's been so happy planning it. And Marcus? What did you think of Marcus? MJ shifted uncomfortably. He's different from what I expected, but Monica loves him so. So you figured you'd keep your mouth shut and hope the checks kept coming. His face flushed. Dad, that's not... MJ, let me ask you something. When was the last time you had a job? I'm between opportunities right now, but there are several possibilities. When was the last time you worked 40 hours a week at something that didn't involve my checkbook? Silence. I'll answer for you, son. Never. You're 28 years old and you've never held a job for more than 6 months. You've never paid your own rent, never bought your own car, never once lived within your means instead of mine. Dad, the economy's tough right now. It's not like when you were starting out. MJ, stop. Just stop with the excuses. I pulled out his financial file, the thickest of the three. $156,000. That's what you've cost me in 5 years. Rent, car payments, credit cards, emergencies, opportunities, just until I get back on my feet. When exactly were you planning to get back on your feet, son? Tears started forming in his eyes. Dad, I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to turn things around. That marketing consulting thing I told you about, the one that requires $5,000 in startup capital that you want me to front, it's a legitimate opportunity. MJ, they're all legitimate opportunities. Every scheme, every plan, every sure thing that requires Daddy's money to get started, and somehow none of them ever work out. So what are you saying? You're cutting me off too? I'm saying it's time for you to learn what the real world feels like. No more monthly allowance, no more rent money, no more bailouts when you make poor decisions. He was crying now, not the manipulative tears he used to use as a child, but genuine fear of facing life without a safety net. Dad, I don't know how to... where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to figure it out, MJ. The same way millions of other people your age figure it out every day. Get a job. Any job. Learn what it feels like to earn money instead of just spending it. But Dad, son, I love you. I love all 3 of you kids more than my own life. But love doesn't mean enabling. Love doesn't mean protecting you from the consequences of your choices. Sometimes love means letting you fall so you can learn to stand on your own. After MJ left, I sat in my recliner with a glass of bourbon, looking at the family photos on the mantel. Pictures of birthday parties and Christmas mornings, graduations and vacations, all the moments when we were truly happy together. Those children in the photographs, they were good kids. Somewhere along the way, though, they'd learned that love meant getting what you wanted, and family meant never having to earn what you received. But it wasn't too late to teach them a different lesson. A harder lesson, maybe, but a more important one. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop giving people what they want and start giving them what they need. What they needed was to learn the value of earned success, honest work, and genuine respect.
And what I needed was to remember that my worth as a man wasn't measured by how much I could give away, but by how much dignity I could maintain while doing it. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something that would last. 1 year later, I'm sitting in the same recliner where this whole story started, but everything else has changed. Outside my window, Dolores's garden is blooming again. I finally learned to tend it myself, and somehow the roses seem brighter than they have since she passed. The New Hope Community Center opened 6 months ago, and driving by there has become my favorite part of any day. Built with the same attention to detail I put into every Washington construction project, it's a building that'll serve this neighborhood for the next 50 years. Kids playing basketball in the gym, seniors taking computer classes, teenagers learning job skills that'll actually mean something in the real world. Pastor Williams calls it Dolores Washington Memorial Community Center, and every time I see that sign, I feel my wife's presence like she's standing right beside me, proud of what we built together. Not the fancy wedding that would have been forgotten in a week, but something that matters, something that lasts. The phone rings less these days, and when it does, it's usually good news. Like last week when Keisha called to tell me she'd been accepted to graduate school at Georgia Tech. Full scholarship. That girl's going to be building bridges and designing buildings before she's 30, and she won't owe anybody a dime for the privilege. "Uncle Sam," she said, her voice bright with excitement, "Mama told me what you did, about my loans. I don't know how to thank you." "Baby girl, you already did. By working hard, by making something of the opportunities you've been given. That's all the thanks I need." Or the call from Ruth last month inviting me to Joshua's high school graduation. My nephew finished second in his class and got a football scholarship to Auburn. They're living in that little house I bought them in a neighborhood where kids can play outside without worry, where Ruth can garden and watch her son grow into the man he's meant to be. "Sam, I still can't believe you did this for us," Ruth said when I visited for the graduation. "This house, this neighborhood, it's everything I dreamed of." "Ruth, you worked night shifts for 25 years taking care of other people's families. It's about time somebody took care of yours." "My own children? Well, that's a more complicated story. Michael lasted exactly 3 weeks after I cut off his funding. His business folded, his crew went to work for competitors who actually paid on time, and the bank foreclosed on that fancy house he couldn't afford without Daddy's subsidies. Last I heard, he was working for Henderson Construction, the same company where I started 40 years ago, learning the trade from the ground up like he should have done from the beginning. Word is, he's actually good at it when he's not playing the big shot. Harold Henderson called me last month, said Michael was showing real potential as a project supervisor. Apparently adversity taught him some humility along with practical skills. "Sam, your boy's got good instincts," Harold told me. "Just needed to learn that construction's about building things right, not building them fast. He'll make it, but he's got to want it bad enough to earn it." MJ surprised me the most. After our last conversation, he disappeared for 2 months. Didn't answer his phone, didn't come around, didn't ask for money. I was starting to worry when he finally called. "Dad, it's Marcus Jr. I'm in Chicago." "Chicago? What are you doing in Chicago, son?" "Working. I got a job at a non-profit that helps homeless veterans find housing and job training. It's not glamorous, and the pay's not great, but, Dad, I'm actually good at this. I'm helping people, and they respect me for the work I do, not because of who my daddy is." 6 months later, he was promoted to program coordinator. Still calls every Sunday, tells me about the veterans he's helping, the lives he's changing. There's something in his voice I haven't heard since he was a little boy. Pride. Real pride. Earned pride. "Dad, I know I was a disappointment for a long time, but I want you to know. Cutting me off was the best thing you ever did for me. I just wish it hadn't taken so long for me to figure that out." Monica. Monica's story is the hardest to tell. She and Marcus tried to salvage the wedding for about 2 weeks after I canceled everything. Turns out, when the Richmond family money wasn't theoretical but actually needed, it became a lot less available. Marcus's parents were happy to help with a modest celebration, which translated to about $20,000 total. $20,000 for a wedding that had required nearly $1 million of my money to meet their standards. The engagement ended 3 days after Monica told Marcus they'd have to scale back their plans. Apparently, a woman who couldn't deliver the social spectacle he'd promised his business associates wasn't worth marrying. He moved on to another young woman within a month, the daughter of a pharmaceutical executive who could afford the Cherokee town and country club lifestyle he required. Monica didn't handle it well. She called me crying at 2 a.m. about 6 weeks after I'd cut her off, drunk and desperate and finally ready to admit some hard truths. Daddy, you were right. About Marcus, about everything. He never loved me.
He loved what you could do for him, what I represented to his social climbing friends. And I let him turn me into someone Mama wouldn't recognize. Come home, baby girl. I can't. Not yet. I'm too ashamed. Monica, there's nothing you could do that would make me stop loving you. Nothing. But you got to want to change. Not just feel sorry for yourself. She hung up, and I didn't hear from her for 4 months. When she finally came home, she looked different. Thinner, quieter, but somehow more solid. More like the daughter I'd raised than the social climber she'd become. Daddy, I got a job. A real job with a marketing firm in Midtown. I'm starting at the bottom, making less money than I spent on purses last year, but it's mine. I earned it. How you feeling about that? Scared? Excited? Like maybe I remember who I used to be before I got lost trying to be someone else. She's been working there 8 months now. Lives in a small apartment she pays for herself. Drives a used Honda instead of the luxury car I used to fund. Shops at Target instead of boutiques. But when she talks about her work, about the clients she's helping, about the campaigns she's developing, there's life in her voice again. Daddy, I've been thinking about what you said, about a real wedding with people who actually love me. If I ever find someone worth marrying, someone who loves me, not what I can buy him, would you still walk me down the aisle? Baby girl, I'd be honored. She started dating someone new last month, a teacher named David who coaches high school basketball and drives a 10-year-old Toyota. When she brought him to Sunday dinner, he looked me in the eye, shook my hand like he meant it, and asked about my work with genuine interest. Mr. Washington, Monica tells me you built most of the custom homes in Stone Mountain. That's incredible. I bet you have some amazing stories. No condescension, no judgment, no attempt to impress me with family connections or inherited wealth. Just a decent man who seemed to appreciate that my daughter was worth getting to know, background and all. After dinner, while Monica was showing him the garden, I pulled her aside. This one's different. Yeah, Daddy, he is. You love him? I'm learning to. And I'm learning the difference between loving someone and loving what they can do for you. The hardest part of this whole year hasn't been watching my children struggle. It's been fighting the urge to rescue them every time they called with problems. When Michael's business failed, when MJ was sleeping on friends' couches, when Monica was crying about Marcus's betrayal, every instinct I had screamed at me to write checks, to fix their problems, to make their pain go away. But Uncle Jerome was right. Sometimes the only way people learn to stand is when you stop carrying them. And the strangest thing is, I'm happier now than I've been in years. Not because my children suffered, I wouldn't wish pain on them for anything, but because they finally started growing. Started becoming the adults they were always capable of being. The money I didn't spend on Monica's wedding and my children's dependents has gone to places where it makes a real difference. The community center is just the beginning. I've started a scholarship fund for kids from working families who want to learn trades. Funded a program that helps veterans start small businesses. Bought medical equipment for the free clinic where Ruth used to volunteer. Every dollar feels like it matters in ways that monthly allowances and bailout checks never did. Last Sunday, all 3 of my children came to dinner together for the first time since Dolores died. We sat around the table she'd set 1,000 times, eating food I'd learned to cook from her recipes, talking and laughing like we used to when they were young. Michael talked about the house he's renovating, with his own money, on his own timeline, to his own standards. MJ shared stories about the veteran he'd helped find housing after 2 years of homelessness. Monica showed us pictures from her first business presentation, beaming with pride at work she'd earned through skill instead of connections. Dad, Michael said as they were getting ready to leave, I owe you an apology. Actually, I owe you about a dozen apologies. You don't owe me anything, son. Yes, I do. I treated you like a bank for years. Took your money, your reputation, your faith in me, and I wasted all of it.
You deserved better from all of us." Monica nodded, tears in her eyes.
"Daddy, I'm sorry it took losing everything to remember who I was raised to be. Mama would have been ashamed of the person I became."
"Your mama would be proud of the people you're becoming now," I told them. "That's all that matters." MJ cleared his throat.
"Dad, we've been talking and we want you to know. We understand why you did what you did. It hurt at the time and we were angry, but we needed it. We needed to fall so we could learn to stand. And we needed to earn your respect instead of just expecting it,"
Monica added. As I watched them drive away that night, Michael in his work truck, MJ in his sensible used car, Monica in her little Honda, I felt something I hadn't felt since Dolores was alive. Complete peace with the choices I'd made. The foundation I built for my family wasn't money or houses or fancy weddings. It was the knowledge that love sometimes means saying no, that respect has to be earned, and that the most valuable things in life can't be bought. They have to be built, one decision at a time, with honesty and hard work and genuine care for others. Tonight, I'm going to pour myself a bourbon and sit on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky the same colors Dolores loved. And I'm going to think about what we built together, not just the business or the house or the wealth, but the legacy that really matters. Children who learn to stand on their own. A community center that serves people who need it. Young people getting educations they've earned. Family members living in dignity instead of dependence. It took me 68 years to understand that the strongest foundation you can build isn't made of concrete and steel. It's made of respect, earned love, and the courage to do what's right even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And that kind of foundation lasts forever.